back.
Welcome friends, new and old. We're back this week talking Quantum Leap 2022 Revival Series continuation, whatever you want to call it, the second season, all the way up to episode 7. After a couple weeks break for Thanksgiving and then for just an unexplained reason last week, we are back with the episode titled A Kind of Magic. Now if you are new here, there will be some spoilers ahead, so consider this your last chance to get out if those aren't for you. On with the show. A Kind of Magic. First of all, a very wasted opportunity to not make this episode fairly centered around magic, who was barely in the episode whatsoever, but it was the Salem witch trials type episode. Now, it took place in Middleton, or Middletown, however you pronounce it, not in Salem, but that's the basic gist of it. And I want to say at the top, after this break, we went out seeing that Secret History, I think it was called, that episode where Ben finally revealed his time-traveling ways. We had some shenanigans going on as far as repercussions that could ripple throughout the timeline, and now we are jumping into the furthest back we've seen any leaps, at least in this series, and that was barely even addressed. It was a wasted opportunity, in my opinion, just like the Magic title, and I think that's probably going to be the underlying element as far as my feelings go for this entire episode. So, the Salem witch trials. I keep saying Salem witch trials. They're just witch trials in general, but Ben finds himself leapt inside Elizabeth and her friend, or I think Elizabeth is actually the maid or something, they said, of the main girl who's on trial for being a witch for killing her husband. And it seems like the town is getting rampant paranoia and fear because they're going through a drought. People are dying from an unspecified reason. So of course they're going to assume it's witchcraft. This is a nice change of pace as far as scenery goes. It doesn't look like the same, Los Angeles like we've been seeing in a lot of episodes. However, it does look very similar to the Old West town, even though it's the other side of the country and 200 years difference. But I digress. Possibly a similar set, maybe even the same one. But it is a nice change of pace to get out of the modern day feeling cities. Another thing that I would put under the category of wasted opportunity doesn't necessarily just lie in this episode in and of itself. It's something that I've kind of been noticing as the show goes on. They are leaning more heavily into Ben alternating between leaping into a man, leaping into a woman, but it seems like they're spending a lot more time with Ben in this series than they did with Sam in the original in a woman. Giggity. But they're not really utilizing that premise to its fullest extent. When he's in a woman, a couple of episodes notwithstanding, they're not really playing with that whole situation. It just happens to be the case, and it doesn't really affect the storyline whatsoever. And I just feel like that's something that they could be implementing into the storyline a little bit more naturally. Now, we have a couple of plots going on here. The witch trial is the leap, and we have the modern day plot, which just, for the most part, is at a standstill. The little bit we get to see with the modern day plot is Ian and Ian's partner. I'm not sure if they're dating, married. I'm not entirely certain where that stands right now. But the one who works at that possibly evil tech corporation that was stealing their information with that computer chip. They kind of do some sort of shenanigans behind the scenes to get it to stop broadcasting. So now our team has a little bit of extra time before they actually catch on to what's going on. So it seems like they're just trying to play out the clock before we get that mid-season finale, season finale. I'm not entirely certain how many episodes we get this season, but that's really the only progress we get on that overarching storyline in the present. Now, the big movement we do get is we get Ian, we get Jen, and eventually we even get Addison coming back into play as the hologram. However, I think this is a little bit too soon. It now seems that Addison is going to become the main hologram once again, and I think that could be a detrimental move because we haven't spent that much time away from her yet, and I don't think it yet feels earned for her to come back into the picture and for Ben to have completely forgiven her and decided they need to work on their friendship. I'm hoping this means that something else is going to go wrong, things are going to take a turn for the worse, and this is going to actually come back to bite them both in the butt down the line, but that remains to be seen. I hope they're not just trying to fast track past this, because while I didn't necessarily care for the relationship drama to begin with, I definitely don't want it to just be glossed over and things to just be put in a new status quo without actually earning them. That's another thing this episode did in spades, is it continued on the train of exposition to the characters, explaining to themselves what they already know. And I think I'm just going to have to get past that and deal with the fact that this is how the writing's going to be when they have so many stories to cram in. They don't have the time to really naturally let things grow. So the Leap storyline in and of itself, the whole Salem witch trials thing, it's not a very fresh story. It's something we've seen time and time again, and it isn't really taking all that much new and adding it to the element. I thought one thing that was potentially going on here the entire time, which turned out to not be the case unless it was so well hidden they haven't revealed it yet, it seemed like maybe one of the other characters was interacting with possibly another Leaper, another hologram, was a Leaper themselves, or was actually communicating with something that was possibly supernatural. But no, they didn't actually lean into any of that. Things that were happening in this episode were just utterly straightforward. There weren't really any twists, and I feel like that's probably where this episode fell down. We're coming back from such a big moment. We're coming back from a break that possibly wasn't even planned when they came up with these episodes, and this was just kind of a middle-of-the-road episode that didn't add too much to the overall story and didn't really advance the characters. In fact, I found Ian's whole subplot of delving into seances and astrology and trying to contact the dead, it doesn't necessarily feel out of character for Ian to be into these things, but it just felt like it didn't fit with the story they were trying to tell. It just kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm wondering if it was just to add a little bit more, I don't know, atmosphere to an episode that was running short or something. But the overall story just felt a little I liked the Maggie character, if that's even her name. I'm not entirely certain that's her name. I liked that character. Didn't necessarily like the way they treated her as abandoning the other girls that were accused of being witches. And I kind of enjoyed the way that Ben was able to rally them together towards the end. But the way that he was utilizing science that was way outside the time frame, that is one aspect I kind of liked, because that goes along with the whole he's kind of falling off the tracks here, and he's kind of going above and beyond his role and taking things into his own hands. Maybe even going a little bit too far and doing things to the timeline that are actually going to add up to become catastrophic down the line. So I do kind of like that version of Ben. It just felt like in this episode itself, there were no real consequences outside of the whole CPR thing early in the episode. There really weren't any characters acting like this was way out of the realm of knowledge. He was saying things in the body of this girl who, and forgive me for saying this, probably wasn't all that educated based on the place she was living, the time frame, her status in life, and all of that stuff. So to have Ben just spouting all of these things, which were probably well and truly beyond anyone else even living in this time frame, let alone the people in this little community, it just seemed like there would have been a bit more reaction aside from, oh, you know what, I guess that's a good idea. The CPR thing was a little weird, but all of this other stuff, we're cool with that. We're just going to go with it. We're all going to be friends from now. It seemed way too easily wrapped up. I know I'm coming down kind of harsh on this episode. While I've been a pretty big proponent of this show, especially the new direction this season has kind of been taking, but I don't think all the episodes can be winners. And for all of the lead up and the trailers and the promos to this episode before the season came out, I thought this was actually going to be a big pivotal episode, but it just didn't really add much or advance much or do anything interesting. There were so many things that could have tied into an overarching plot. There were so many character moments that just didn't happen. There was no real explanation as to why Ben went back this far. There was no explanation on another Leaper, anything going on with a mysterious modern day plot. The only real advancement we got is Addison is now coming back into the picture as a hologram, and they've kind of rectified things because apparently Ben now feels fine because he kissed somebody else a week ago. I don't know. I'm coming down too harsh, I know that. This episode just really failed at all the things I was hoping for. If this episode was early on in the show and didn't have all of these other things it was trying to juggle, I probably would feel a little better about it, but as it stands, it's just kind of a nothing episode when the show really needs to be digging in and doing some really big things to advance the overall story. Those are just my thoughts. I know they were kind of jumbled. I know they were kind of negative, but I'm really excited for next episode. It seems like we're actually finally going to that Egypt/spy episode, so I have high hopes for that, and I'm very much looking forward to see what we get in the future. I don't know why, but I feel like Janice should have been the character that they're relying on instead of Ian's partner in this season, and that might be another reason I'm having doubts on what's going on. But leave all your thoughts down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. And until next time.
Let it rain!